All right, well, it's gonna take a while for that to disappear. So, 1, 2, 3, let's go. Welcome to another cast of the Champions Cup, presented by AfreecaTV, and so lovingly giving out those replays for a fee, but one that I am more than happy to give them for excellent coverage of the games, and some excellent games were given to us. No spoilers, but we are currently in the semifinals, so I'll spoil that much. You guys can follow along as I get into Maru versus Byun, a best of 5 to determine who goes on to the finals of this tournament. In the bottom left of Data C, it is Shopify Rebellion Byun. And in the top right, we do have Onside Gaming's Maru. Fun story for you guys, not particularly fun for me. I actually did cast Maru winning over Solar in the quarterfinals, but didn't press that start recording button. So isn't that fun? Isn't that the bee's knees? Yeah. Still a good use of my time, as I am using a lot of these replays to prep for the upcoming DreamHack Atlanta, which hopefully you all are getting also ready to watch. But it was a bit of a sad moment when I looked over to press the stop recording button, and it wasn't recording at all to begin with. Anywho, that is the thing that happened. Maru did beat Byun, or Maru beat. Hold on here, Solar. I just said it. And then I actually don't remember who Byun beat in the quarterfinals. Could probably go look it up, but not going to currently. So you just know that the TvT is here on our doorstep for the semifinals, and who do I believe is going to win this one? Well, since I actually managed to avoid spoilers, I don't actually know. I just figured that it's going to be Maru. Maru's win rate in TvT still absolutely insane. Maybe not as insane as it once was. I actually haven't checked since 2021. So basically a full year, but we all know that narrative that he had only lost like 1, maybe 2 series, and in total only like 5 games or something completely insane like that, because it's not like he's facing low-tier players. He's facing the other best Terrans of the world, Byun included. These two do have kind of a particularly similar play style, leading up to, I want to say, the mid and late game, where I think then they both conform to what TvT makes us to conform to, right? Which is going into the Marine tank and then into the triple starport mass Raven Viking game. And I do believe that Maru does it better. But up until that point, yeah, I think we're going to see some similar stuff in terms of aggression. Just not totally similar, like, okay, let's go ahead and fast forward ×8. Because I do think that while both of them might be aggressive, throwing out some factory expands, because that's what you do in TvT, throwing out the occasional Widow Mine drop or earlier tank push, something like that, I do think that it's going to be variations of that early aggression that are going to meet maybe in the middle of the map, maybe on each other's side of the map, and then cause a mini base race situation. Because that's what's going to happen with players who tend to want that control over the early game, either because it's part of their style or because they really believe that, you know, that's the best way to play this one out, which could definitely be argued is the best for TvT. But we know there are some Terrans out there who would, let's say 75% of the time, just opt to go for more defense, not open up with these medevac openers, and I absolutely called it, so go me. 2 medevac openers on the menu, guys. Byun going for very kind of odd 1-2 Reapers, 4 Marines, and a Hellion. Maru going for a tank and 4 Marines, which I think is a little bit more expected. Usually either a Cyclone or a tank. Byun is like kind of even more odd than usual. So they are going to bypass each other. Byun's build a little bit faster. That's why it probably is missing that critical factory unit, which there are some arguments as to whether or not it's actually, I guess, you know, the most important thing about the drop, but I'll get into that perhaps in a second, because of course we got to watch how this action unfolds. Well, already Maru taking a little bit more damage. Byun had a very quick pull away because Maru opted to go for the slow push on the forward natural. So you could actually see it kind of coming and be like, oh, okay, I gotta pull away. But now it's even up on the SEV losses. However, now it's down to, okay, who's losing the most mining time? Well, right now, both pretty similar. One base to one base is basically where we're at. Maru yet to grab that medevac despite a couple of Cyclone lock-ons. And, well, Byun yet to really do much damage at all to his opponent's drop. That tank only taking a little bit of pepper. I'm not even sure from what. The Cyclone lock-on perhaps earlier. Another one is going to happen, too. It's going to force a pickup, very last-second pickup there from Maru, but does ultimately save it. Actually, kind of not lucky that Byun got that lock-on, because he did calculate, you know, the amount of shots necessary to kill a Cyclone, and him being able to get out of range before that actually happened, but it's not going to happen again with those Marines actually being able to posture in front of the tank and add any damage. The Raven had to come in with an auto turret, which fortunately, that's what Ravens do best, and Maru is forced back, at least temporarily, to getting a lock on to his opponent's Cyclone was exactly what he wanted to do right there, and now Byun is once again on the defensive. Maru has completely wiped out the forms of aggression on his side of the map, pulled his SCVs back to mining on the two bases, and has taken quite the worker lead as well. Another auto turret comes down, trying to get rid of a tank that Maru has rallied across the map. Didn't get rid of it, but at least tanked one of the shots, so Byun's high ground tank actually destroys Maru's before it also basically equalizes on the shot count, right? Auto turret to auto turret. Kind of confused for a second whose was whose as they both attacked each other's, and we do have just non-stop micro battles going on right now. Finally, Maru is forced to actually completely 100% flee, not going to continue any more of this aggression. And where does that leave us? Freaking good question. Maru's third CC almost done. Byun's not yet halfway done, so a lead there for Maru. Maru keeps that SCV lead at about 8, so another lead for Maru there. The biggest lead that Byun might have is in that Raven count, right? So 3 Ravens for Byun versus Maru's 2. That's also just a decision, frankly. Maru decided to go for 2 and then right into those Vikings. Byun held off on the Vikings a little bit. So lead, different composition, whatever you want to call it. The point is that is the best thing going for Byun right now. I think Maru obviously picked up on the fact that it was triple Raven and is going to go ahead and boldly use his Raven for harassment, at least for now. There's no guarantee that, of course, they won't go into Vikings, and I believe he knows there's at least 1 on the field. Now there are 2, but not really the easiest to tear down an entire Raven with a single Viking, right? So Maru getting just a little bit extra, pushing his worker lead up to about 9, 10, actually, currently at 11. So his faster third command center helping a little bit there. The auto turret harassment helping a little bit there. The Reaper, actually not quite sure what it was hoping to grab as a scout there. Besides being just like, why not? Why not send the Reaper in? It's not going to help for the rest of the game. I don't know what else it really could have seen. I mean, it could have seen the size of the army, and it could have also seen if the army was already moving out, which are very important things. As far as it being there to see, is it mech, is it bio, I mean, it's so unlikely that these Terran players are going to go for, oh, Sim's going to go down, mech these days. So that's triple Raven that I just gave Byun credit for is going to be basically suicided in. Maybe one of the Ravens will be able to escape. The Vikings are already on the hunt. One goes down, flying over the auto turret, but the rest of them are still fine. There's even a missile turret from Maru a little bit earlier on, but actually helping a lot. And now that guarantees all 3 Ravens are going to be dead. Maru, always mindful of what else could be happening, actually scanned the middle of the map, ensuring that he's not being pounced upon elsewhere while his army gave that chase. So yeah, Byun completely suiciding the Ravens in. Bunch of auto turrets got slapped down, yeah, but the amount of SCV damage looks to be quite low, if it was any. The biggest takeaway there was that Stim got denied, but Stim was only, I want to say, like 30 seconds in, which is still giving Byun Stim and combat shields that extra boost ahead, so no doubt impactful, but just probably not as impactful as he wanted it to be. Overall, losing those 3 Ravens does hurt. We're no longer in a TvT where the Raven is seen as a unit that you can, I guess, temporarily give up at the very least. Because I don't think we were ever at a point where you would just be like, oh, I lost a Raven, big deal. Like, Ravens have always been a big deal. But certainly nowadays in TvT, the more that we push forward in StarCraft, the more that we push macro forward. That's kind of the tale of all of the matchups, but especially in TvT, it's kind of one of those matchups where if you do get the third command centers, you're like 99% chance you're going to go to fourth, basically. You're going to have a 4-base versus 4-base scenario. And when you have 4-base versus 4-base being kind of an automatic jump from 3-base, you're also usually going to have that automatic jump, not maybe a whole lot of change up there, reacting necessarily to your opponent in a very strong way. You're just going to go right into more starports a lot of the time. So it's not going to be super immediate, but the point is, like, Byun having 3 Ravens, it helps the entire time you're on this composition. It might lose a little bit of strength if you both max out purely and entirely on Marine Tank, just with the mobility issue that it has and being difficult to hold on to. But yeah, then you're pretty much right into that triple starport TvT, and you don't have that 3 Raven boost from earlier. But anyways, we do still have a little bit of the Marine Tank game to play. It's not like we're literally just jumping forward, but basically with it being still pretty even, despite Maru gaining leads in the economy, with the way this set up, yeah, I'm expecting some pretty fast level starport, and there it is. So Maru, you know, maybe the supply doesn't quite look that devastating for Byun. Like, oh, I thought, you know, a 10 worker advantage actually be a much bigger deal. It still is a big deal. We know how much TvT can cover deficits, but it is a big deal, not in the supply necessarily. Maru is coming in with a very strong army. It has a lot to do more with the infrastructure that Maru was able to get ahead of Byun. So a second factory was much faster from Maru, and the additional 2 starports are also much faster than Maru. Byun, I think eventually is planning on doing that, but needs to make sure that he's alive to do it a little while longer. But only 2 medevacs from Byun as he realizes that it is pretty much going into that late stage. You just cut your losses almost on that medevac count and just try to bolster the Viking count without necessarily investing into more starports, so you can at least keep up with a guy who might be swapping. But as I'm saying it, I said Byun is probably going to go into the additional starports. He does choose to add on 3 more barracks. So this could be Byun playing a little bit more to his Byun personality, which, you know, if one person was going to choose to just go for more Marines and less on the Viking game, it would be Byun. I think we'd all guess that. But then also could be a little bit more of that desperation play. Desperation in the fact that in this particular game, he is behind, but then also desperation as a whole against Maru when it comes to the late game. Like, how many players are actually going to see the encroaching late game versus Maru in a TvT and say, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to win this one. Not many. Even those who have taken a lead in a game still say, oh, well, I don't know about this. I don't know about going into the late game. Maru just threw away a chunk of Marines in a seemingly useless dash-in. And it was pretty useless. The Marines all died for no reason. But the medevacs were saved, more expensive, harder to build. And that supply is going to be filled with something more important a lot of time anyways. There's going to be Vikings and Ravens, but it's not quite there yet. So this is the problem, right? Byun, he might be going for a whole lot of ground army, emphasizing the Marine production, but still only on those 2 medevacs, has been building consistently the Viking count. So he comes in here with what was a 1 Viking lead, but just kind of the matters at hand, the actual execution of the engagement comes out behind on the air war, and with only double medevac to try and do a drop with, it's really not the scariest thing in the world, especially because Maru already had his units somewhat in position and missile turrets already placed. So 16 SCVs would have been devastating at 7 minutes. Absolutely not a big deal when Maru is already on his 5th base as a planetary, static defense and tanks. Like, Maru is totally locked up defensively. He's not going to get broken, at least easily, anywhere. And if he does get broken, it might only be a temporary problem. So, for instance, over here, okay, maybe those tanks aren't going to be enough of the planetary to stop Byun from sieging up and destroying it. Maru losing a 5th is not as big of a deal as it maybe once was years ago. And in this particular game, is him losing that lead, but still not losing some of the other ones, for instance, this compositional change. So the Ravens still playing an amazing part in this game, but maybe not this one in particular. Tanks here are going to be enough of a depth to actually stop Byun from getting too much more ground, but Maru trying to come in and actually break Byun's tank line didn't quite work out. The Ravens don't have that much energy, and this Liberator wasn't here to begin with. Now it's here, and no Marines, no Vikings stop that is going to force Byun back. So one simple unit, gaining that air control, so important in TvT, right? Byun has really tried to find a hole in the defense of Maru. Was so close to doing so, too. He was really close to killing that planetary at the very least. And again, that might not have been the turnaround moment, but it still would have been something, right? But he didn't even get that. And Maru is still moving on to a superior composition when used correctly. And that is always a very important part about StarCraft, is using it correctly. But we kind of assume that Maru will. So while the tank Raven Viking game can be seen as a little more dangerous just with its control issues, kind of hard to control, kind of needs to be all together as well. You're not going to get away with a bit of miscontrol or divvying up your army like you would with Marine tank. It still is superior. So the one, basically what you got to do is one, stop any multi-pronged harassment. Make sure you're kind of locked up with planetaries and tanks and Santa Towers. And then two, make sure that when you do move out, you don't get completely surrounded, as that's the only time Byun's army is going to be better. Now, Byun has tried to pull Maru apart, and it's not really worked, but at least getting... Oh, command center killed. One of Maru's extra command centers gets killed, pulls off of mining as well, which most impactful on the gas mining. Maru definitely needs more of that. And Byun is still looking for that real gut punch through the middle to actually do some devastating damage to Maru. It looks like he has considered this to at least have given him control over the game again, and it certainly has. I mean, he's been the one aggressing this entire time, right? So he's also had a lot of his freedom on his side of the map to easily gain extra command centers. So his 5th is also on the location, and he has extra orbitals, has lined up all of his production and his upgrades. So he is now deciding that going on to the late game Starports game is a good thing to do, which I think I would agree. He still has to walk the line. He decides to go for this compositional change as Maru actually successfully holds. Right now, Maru with a 2030 army. Opposite deficit, bonus, surplus. There you go. Then if Byun's thinking, okay, well, I'm going to change over to those starports, I mean... Is he's gonna just die, right? Like, so he can't actually do that. Maru just winning a lot of the defensive battles. Byun trying to push this position has not worked out at all. Actually, one of the worst moments of this game for Byun in the last few minutes. And now is the time for Maru to do the push, to move across the map. Byun doesn't have the army supply of pure Marine tank to get that huge surround that I was talking about, so that's less of a worry for Maru. Nor does he have the time to start up his own air transition, since Maru still has 10 Vikings and 6 Ravens. If those were entirely killed in engagement, it'd be a different story. But Byun is a rock in a hard place. There's not really anything he can do against this wave that's coming at him, basically. It's a tsunami at this point. And he's trying his best to find some high grounds, but it's not really working out. It's losing tank after tank. Still trying to buy as much time as possible, but for what, really? For what? A little bit of denied mining. Sure, okay, great. But then what about this gigantic army that is encroaching on his own 3rd base? It's gonna be dealt with somehow. Looking at Byun's army right now, it doesn't look like it can be. His army supply has once again reached the likes of Maru's, but I can't tell you where. It doesn't look like it has, So I still doubt its validity. Byun is going to go for the old wraparounds, not to go for a huge surround necessarily, because Maru is actually entirely, mostly, pulled back his army, but just to go for kind of a run-by, a desperate gambit to try and, once again, buy time and do some devastating damage to what is supposed to be a slower army, and again, a one that is more fragile to be quick with, right? You're going to be very careful with Ravens. If they fly over a couple of Marines, you don't really get those seconds to actually pull them back. They're just dead. So Byun tried to take advantage of mobility, didn't really work out. Third base once again saved from Maru. Marine still being a bother, and it looks like Maru might just go ahead and lose an entire command center. A little bit too on forward on that expansion, but he is on Byun's side of the map with his tanks, Vikings, and Ravens. And again, this army is going to be so difficult to defend against. Big drop into the main base. Byun has been rather insistent with this, and it's always been not hugely impactful, but it's always done a little bit, right? So a lot of SCV losses, or some production losses, or some reinforcement losses. It's always done something. It just hasn't been enough, which is so often the tale when a Terran faces Maru in TvT. It's like, okay, you're playing really great, but, you know, it's not enough, so don't even try. And it's going to be the same story here, I believe. Byun is once again trying to find that opening while the rest of Maru's army is elsewhere. He goes up through the middle and will very much so find that opening. Basically, no tanks were positioned. All of them were in the main base, either being killed by the drop or sieging up and then not being microed because there's so much action happening in this TvT. So Maru gets this third base finally, I guess, really broken. Byun might even try to continue siege hopping, but he's always got to worry about those Ravens. They haven't showed themselves quite yet. They're there kind of showing themselves and actually pulling the trigger. Once they pull the trigger on all of the spells they have available, then there's, again, not much that Byun can do. So Interference Matrix and Auto Turrets and Anti-Armor Missile all can come down and help out. Maru did go ahead and just bring his tanks back after destroying Byun's fake base. And with now more Interference Matrix, with so many Ravens and so much energy, there's almost no end to it. It should be the case that Byun has to disengage, but Byun really is making this quite a battle with this pure Marine tank. It is the cheaper option, so it is supposed to be doing a little bit better in these very desperate scenarios. Good pick up there from Maru. But Maru was hoping that one of these drives to the middle with his entire army would have done it by now. They haven't. Byun has been able to expand just enough to kind of always have some money in the bank, particularly enough money to go ahead and continue reinforcing with 16 Marines at a time and 2 tanks and medevacs whenever he can spare the cash, which now that he has his bottom right base is an orbital kind of hidden. I don't think Maru realized that was there. And this base is an orbital to the middle left as well. He does have that extra cash, and, you know, with the Terran going pure Marine tank, gas is not as much of an issue if you have 6-8 gases, so plenty of gas in the bank for Byun. So he's constantly reinforcing, he's constantly rebuilding the army, really forcing Maru to position himself carefully and always think about any potential way to throw this game. So he realizes how dangerous it is to let Byun, for instance, get up on this high ground. So he does pull everything back. He does take that seriously. And then that resets the momentum once again to a place where maybe if Byun could do just a little bit more, a drop that actually lasts a long time or does a lot of damage, then maybe he could start to really win this game and either transition himself into that air like he once planned to do, or actually just overwhelm Maru after Maru takes too bad of trades. And with this army, again, it is usually likely that the tank Raven Viking player does lose units kind of haphazardly. Again, running over Marines, leaving tanks undefended. Exactly what's happening here, but there were so many tanks, more of a tank depth than Byun was anticipating. That actually wasn't too bad of a trade. Had they not covered each other as well as they did by Maru there, that probably would have been a few freebies. Definitely not freebies in this case, and Byun is still down in that supply with SCVs being pulled and Ravens coming in with all that energy. Byun is not going to find too much more on this particular base. 12 SCVs have been killed, but that's not a super big deal, and Byun still remains in that less supply situation, especially after losing all these medevacs on a failed attempt to run away. So remember how I said Byun was capable of remaxing, capable of rebuilding all these armies, and that's why he's still in it? For it feels like a constant engagement for 9 minutes. Well, the rush has ended. The adrenaline is gone. Byun had these 2 bases, but not even fully saturated by looks of things, while also having some minerals on the original 4 bases, right? So it was a good economy, but if you're not constantly expanding, and you are taking these urgent trades, then very suddenly you're like, oh, I don't have the ability to remax. I'm kind of screwed here. It happens so quickly. Check the resources lost. It is, as expected, Byun with almost, actually 10,000 worse than Maru. That's usually what you would expect here. And that's I mean, 10,000 is a humongous number. It's just... that's why he needs so many bases mining, and once it was really only down to 2 and a quarter, basically, he did not have enough to remax as quickly as necessary to continue taking rapid-fire engagements. He was forced to basically entirely withdraw from his aggressive stance and then be on the defensive, which Maru once again took full advantage of by actually going and pushing with all of the army that he had. Now, Maru also is going to need a new base eventually, especially when it comes to that gas, so this base is pretty important, but it's not yet enough again. If there could be more, if there could be another kill on the other planetary, then maybe Byun is starting to pull this around. If he had completely denied this base and then this one, then maybe he can turn this around. But he didn't. There is still a base mining, soon to probably get its gases, as Maru does absolutely need that, and Byun is certainly even more broke. So that is also the main problem. So again, if Maru had lost this base and had this one, okay, fine, but Byun still has 3 bases completely mining minerals. Again, the tides might change. But that is just not the situation. Maru's army, especially when it's all combined together, it's just going to be too good for the amount of army that Byun has. So even though they've really both reached a point where it's difficult to replace it, Maru has not had as much necessity to replace the army. Again, the resources lost telling that tale. So this is going to be its Byun at half the army supply, an inferior army supply in many ways, unless it gets that perfect engagement. And if it's not a full army, then it's probably not going to get the perfect engagement. It's going to have to tap out very soon. Very soon. Maru's got 8 Ravens with enough energy to continually interference matrix, similar to one of the pushes that happened 10 minutes ago. Just interference matrix, move forward. Interference matrix, move forward. As well as auto turret spam that honestly he could probably do with the full might of his army, but would be the more dangerous way to play. And anti-armor missile to make the inferior army even more inferior. Byun is not one to give up. We know that about him. So he's going to take the top left with his main, I think. That might actually be his main. I'm sure he is aware that Maru is close to being desperate. You know, he sees the map. Okay, there's the top arrow. But I was going to say, he does see, you know, the map as it really is for the most part. And he knows that this base is really the only one mining and this one's starting to run out. But if this was a closer supply gap, staying in it would have been actually a very realistic chance to come back, but it was quite a severe supply gap. So that's going to be it for game number 1. Hell of a battle fought by Byun. And of course Maru, but we just kind of give Maru that credit by default. It really is Byun versus Maru, more so than the other way around. Let's get into game number 2. Game number 2 on Tropical Sacrifice. In the bottom left, we have Byun. In the top right, it is Maru. First game lasted quite some time, with Maru almost inevitably taking a macro TvT. Almost inevitably. He does tend to win those, but not always. And he wasn't without concern. The thing is, me painting the picture in the last game as a close but no cigar was ultimately accurate, because Maru did win. But maybe at times it was overemphasized. Maybe at times it was almost too cavalier the way I said, well, Maru's fine. And I think for a lot of other Terrans, it would have been inaccurate. You know, with Maru getting pushed on his 5th, if it was a Maru and he almost lost that planetary, I would have said to maybe like a Hero Marine playing in that position, or a Ryung playing in that position, or something like that, I would have said, this is really important, this is really pivotal that he keeps it alive. Whereas for Maru, I was like, well, it's obviously important, but it's not the biggest of deals. 1, because he had an earlier lead, but also 2, because it is Maru, and we expect his trades to nonetheless be very efficient for the rest of the game. So, I mean, make no mistake, Byun almost opened up those opportunities. He really had to force them open, and they, you know, quite couldn't, but he almost did. So Byun still plays a very high-level TvT, it's just that Maru is Maru. And even when TvT gets truly desperate, we don't expect him to falter. I would almost entirely blame Maru for a lot of the ways that TvT meta has developed, and how likely it is to be a very long matchup. Again, if you get to a third base, it seems so often you're getting into a fourth and a fifth. So there's not that really epic back and forth 3cc versus 3cc that we might have had years ago. But anywho, it did start off with a aggressive opener from both players. This time around, Maru starting things off aggressive quicker at the very least. Byun might still be aggressive, but he is factory expanding. So if he does something like a medevac drop, it's happening a lot later. 2 Reapers being produced right off the bat. None in proxy. Could be devastating to Byun, but isn't supposed to be devastating. It's more likely to just cause a hiccup. But it does also kind of depend on how Byun really uses his opener. So obviously it's a factory expand. But what from that factory? What from the barracks? And it is going to be a continued dedication to these early game units, but powerful early game units. It still can be awkward. You know, the Marines would already be out, I believe, if these were Marines, not Reapers. And while they're not as microable as Reapers, they can stand their ground at DPS. Something to consider for Maru. Looks like with 3 Reapers not finding any opening initially, this will be a not so big deal. As now Byun's on 3 himself with 2 Hellions. It's pretty strong. Just needs to make sure that the Hellions are shooting somewhat well, which is still a big issue. 5 Reapers still more microable than 3 Reapers and 2 Hellions. With the ramp on Byun's side as well on Tropical Sacrifice. I'm not sure Maru's going to be able to break through. He could go once again go into the main and just kind of wreak havoc, but he is going to force the issue on the high ground, jump up into it. The Hellion was trying to soak up as many shots as possible, but didn't really end up helping overall. At the end of the day, 3 Hellions and 3 Reapers was soon to be 5. Just dominated that fight. Really, as long as the Hellions got decent shots. You know, like the only way that did not go well for Byun was if Maru was able to concave and split and pull back Reapers because they just barely don't die because the Hellion is shooting 1 apiece. But we're kind of having a reverse mirror image scenario where Byun tries to rush up the ramp hoping to find Maru, perhaps being, you know, majorly a little bit greedier than he was. If there were less Reapers being produced after the first 5, if there were no Reapers being produced after the first 5, right, and those were Marines, even though, again, they can kind of stand their ground and they produce quickly, that might have been a more successful break for Byun, because it got kind of close. He did catch Maru maybe a little bit by surprise, a little bit under-armied, that's a word, and could have been a little worse, but no, Maru was continuing to build those Reapers, continuing to build those Hellions. So how many did he get in total? 3. So if he's up at 2, again, that could have been different. Really bigger opener would have been there if Maru had been greedier about his add-ons and his transition over into kind of the next stage of TvT. But he was not, so it's been a successful defense really on both sides. That's how you would put it. With Byun taking an army supply lead, which might not matter once tanks come into play, a 9, 8, whatever army supply lead, but right now maybe could. Maru is going to provide the littlest bit of pressure with a medevac drop. Well, 2 Reapers and 2 Hellions. And seriously, such a light amount of pressure that even if the Cyclone wasn't there, I'm not sure it would have done very much. And Maru is going to also take his 3rd on location, which that is the really important takeaway, I think, from here. Byun did opt to go for a single Banshee, which seems to be making its way more so in the TvT. Which I kind of like. The TvT, or the Banshee here, is doing more than any other option that Byun could have chosen would have. If you went for a Viking, do you really send those across the map to do harassment? Not usually. If you go for a Raven, do you usually send it across the map to do harassment? A lot of the time, but a little bit later. Alright, a Banshee, its job is to literally go across the map and not just harass, but also scout. So, what I'm trying to say is that I don't think the Banshee, any other choice but the Banshee, would have scouted the 3rd CC on location, at least at this time, and wouldn't have killed an SCV to be a bother. But otherwise, is the Banshee doing a whole lot? No, not really. But that information is still nice to have. Maru is still going to get away with it. Byun's not already trying to push across the map. But it's still something nice to know. Now for Byun, now his 3rd C is finishing up, so it's not the latest timing here. And he is getting into you know, maybe a better competition with those Ravens, but now he is the one that has that very strong but more difficult to use, less mobile composition than Maru. With Maru going into 2 Reapers as an opener, 2 Racks, he has gone into a bit more of, you know, like almost a 2-on-1 setup, right? So mobility is on his side. He's got Marines with Stim, he's got Medivacs, and he is looking to kind of abuse that mobility with a big drop into the main base. Even if he didn't drop, the mere fact that he could still be on the offensive gives him a lot of map control and general control over this game, which is why I felt so confident going into the 3rd CC on location. But going for the big drop ends up being a slam dunk, absolutely the right thing to do. The Ravens coming in a little bit late, maybe will be the reason he holds. That tank having to reposition wasn't adding the shots that would have helped against the Marines, and yes, those auto turrets absolutely did help. We had the Banshee, I think, maybe go back in for a couple of SCV kills, so Maru is actually behind by 1. And he has lost that army supply lead yet again, if he ever had it, actually. So it's still kind of concerning for Maru. That drop looked like a slam dunk, but it actually wasn't. Kind of backfired once the Ravens did get involved. The Cyclone lock-ons from Maru have been so good. Oh, he's gonna get the tank. I feel like there should be a mechanic where, you know, there's like almost like a get down Mr. President mechanic. If an SCV had blocked the target lock-on by positioning its body in front of the tank, you would have saved the tank. But it doesn't happen that way, does it? Despite being a projectile in a straight line, the SCV couldn't sacrifice its life. Womp womp. But seriously, a tank kill for Maru is pretty crucial. He doesn't really want Byun to get too confident and then move across the map with a superior tank count, as well as still kind of controlling the skies. 4 Vikings and a Ravens, absolutely nothing but Medivacs for Maru. And Maru, well, even if he was scared of the push from Byun, it is a drop. Doesn't really show fear. He was trying to move out once again, and that's why Byun's drop is doing the damage that it is. Maru late to defending, now urgently trying to defend, picks up a very awkward number of units, basically. You know, at the end of the day, even though it was that was 16 Marines and 2 Medivacs, he would not have been firing the entire time. Right, you're unloading into the Marines, so with a similar number of Marines. I mean, he does have the combat shield upgrade over his opponents, which has impacted some of these Marine battles, but I still don't know dropping on top of that would have really been ever that good of an idea. Nonetheless, Maru still holds, although this one Marine's trying to do more damage, and at the very least, it is doing a great job at distracting lots of Marines from Maru on the high ground. But Maru, once again, so smart. So good at the matchup, anticipating the move out in the front lines, just uses a scan. Figures that's a-okay to use a scan right there. And I'm not sure if it did see the tail end of the potential move out from Byun or not. I'm not sure, but it probably would have. Although in Tropical Sacrifice, I mean, there's so many ways to get across the map. That one scan might not have told the full tale. What if the army was coming through here, right? As it is, Byun is wanting to go across the bridges, to go across and actually hit Maru, and Maru is trying his best to actually anticipate that. He's gonna jump on top of the tanks with pure Marine and go ahead and sack them by the looks of things. Yeah, actually gets a couple of tanks and then all of the Vikings that Byun was not controlling because Byun was doing a double drop in the main once again. This guy loves his drops, for the love of God. And Maru is going to take a hefty loss of SCVs, have his +2 armor denied, and perhaps even his +2 attack. Looks like Byun is going to go after it. Once he realizes it's kind of free game, it's actually just something he could absolutely get. The army from Maru was a bit late to responding as it was so far out of position, had to unsiege whatever it was. So he's like, yeah, hell yeah, I'm going to get both upgrades. And Maru, I think, is in too desperate of a scenario. He's very close to being in too desperate of a scenario. Byun denies the 4th command center while taking his own, so he's gonna get a lead there, and he's already up 10 SCVs. That 2-2 upgrade being, you know, almost done for Byun. Before Maru can even replace his engineering bays or start up the upgrades again. Doesn't have the money. It's absolutely freaking huge. Especially because Maru is choosing to go for 3 additional barracks. He is not going into the double starport. He doesn't have a second factory. So the unit that he is going to create the most of the Marines, and of course you always create more Marines than anything else, but you know what I'm saying. The unit that he's depending on most, the Marine, is going to be out-upgraded against someone who is also actually going to match that Marine presence, but with more tanks, with more upgrades. So, you know, TLDR, Maru should, hypothetically, be really screwed. Like, there's no change-up that makes you at least wonder how it's gonna work, right? When ZDZ happens and someone has 20 roach, or the guys have 40 roach, you know how that's gonna go. If they have 10 mutas and 20 roach versus 40 roach, you're always like, well, you know, X, Y, Z, B, whatever, like, it can happen. And that's kind of what the situation is here. Maru just has less good units, less units in general, and Byun is not going to stop the aggression. And Maru is losing all of those tanks that he absolutely needed to retain, considering he won't be replacing them all that quickly. Down now, almost 100 supply. Byun executing his victories in the early game and mid-game almost flawlessly to what ended up not being a late game, actually. Kind of stopped at the mid-game, sub 13 minutes. So well done to Byun. That constant aggression really paying off this particular game. Last time it was always just a little bit short, and this time it was absolutely perfect. So tied up 1-1, let's head into game 3. Game number 3, after tying it all up. In the top right, we have Byun. In the bottom left, it is Maru. He is sending out a cheeky little SCV, you know? If he had only proxied one of those barracks last game, maybe he would have won. Dun dun dun. Actually, this looks like it might be... Oh no, there's a second SCV. There it goes. There it is. Hello, boyo. Alright, so it's gonna be proxy T-Rex Reaper. So he's like, if only I proxied both of those. That would have done it. I don't know if that is true, but it could be true. It's a very short map. You're gonna get right on up there with your proxy barracks. And Maru, you just know that he has very good control. So, thought for a second it could just be a, proxy Marauder if it was only one SCV. No, full-on dedicating with a 14-14 as well. So really, this is the most dedicated a 2-Rax can get. You know, there's like 16-16, I want to say, but I guess it's kind of the two choices, right? There's like the full-on committal, and then there's the, well, I can actually kind of fit some of the things in here, and a couple SCVs extra does make a big deal. So in this case, Byun, is basically going to have there's like that much harder of a time defending. There is no world in which a Terran player would not be factory expanding on Waterfall. There just isn't. So it's not that Maru is hoping to find him 1-Rax expanding. No, he just knows that this aggression is going to be difficult to deal with no matter what. Now, if he could have gotten Byun totally caught off guard, like, wabam, 2 Reapers in your face, and Byun doesn't have that time to even, like, mentally prepare or physically place his units in the proper position, that would have been ideal. But Byun, with the supply depot over here, does also check for this very aggressive proxy barracks position. Good defense so far. You gotta pull the SCVs, and I think any of the 2-Rax the 2-Rax is this far in your face, you gotta pull the SCVs, is what I'm trying to say. So whether it was the 14-14 or the later version, you gotta pull the SCVs. And the SCV pull is going to get a lot done here. Actually, I thought the Reaper was a goner for sure. I just thought that died. Okay then, yeah, this is excellent defense so far. Yeah. Marine and a Reaper. See, that's how the snowball starts. It's like, oh, well, I killed one of his and he killed one of mine. Like, that's not that big of a deal. But then, they're building Reapers, you're building Marines. At the end of the day, the Reapers do have more micro-ability. But no. Can't even kill the Reaper. And this one grenade from the Reaper is quite helpful. Its mobility, able to tag and run back, also quite helpful. And obviously, once the Hellion is out, that usually puts the stopper in the rush. Not always. If this barracks hadn't been lifted and was still pumping out Reapers, Byun would very seriously have to worry about a big Reaper jump up, a kind of almost desperate gambit. But with the barracks lifted, he more so had to worry about harassment. The pesky Reapers killing this supply depot thing, right? So, yeah, it's a bit of a tell to Maru's non-dedication, but it also is kind of annoying. So, Maru, he might even... I wonder if he would try to steal an add-on. That would be amazing. No sad add-ons to steal, never mind. So just using the healthier barracks to get even more scouting done and sending his weakened barracks back. It looks like he will actually get the supply depot. No SCVs were pulled to repair. And if they were, he would have taken some SCVs anyways. And we have the continued battle of the opener of the barracks versus Marines. Marines versus barracks. Eventually, Marines will win. So Maru, what was happening behind all of this? He's going into Cyclones and the upgraded Cyclones as well, which seems to be an increasingly more popular option as a follow-up from the Turax Reaper. It basically continues giving you a lot of map control. So the Reapers give you it because you're the aggressor. They might be pushed back eventually. You know, if the guy has Howlings, you only have Reapers. Okay, now they have map control, but then you kind of one-up that one-up with Cyclones, and you further one-up the one-up. I've lost track, with the Cyclone upgrade. So it does give you that map control. Obviously, if Maru was worried about anything from the skies with his slower starport, the Turax, if it was slower actually, it wouldn't have mattered. The Raven, Banshee, Viking, Liberator, Harassment, it's not going to do very well because the Factory gives you this amazing defensive tool called the Cyclone. So that really isn't even a part of the, oh, here's the downside of the Turax Reaper build, which is what we used to say years ago. Now, no longer. So consistent map control from Maru, the ability to snipe very important units because it's the early game of TvT, so almost every unit is important. Oh, and with a medevac, the ability to micro. 2v2. But now the upgrade for Maru is done, so his Cyclones are better, but then add on the micro and his Cyclones are pretty much perfect. Oh, he barely didn't get that one. Maru is up to 3 Cyclones. Not sure where the third one is. I guess staying at home somewhere. Oh yeah, because there's a Banshee, so that was a good idea. Again, once again, with kind of just aha, Banshee. That does do a little bit of damage and also gets that scouting without kind of dedicating something more important. So you still lost some building time in the starport to go into another Raven faster, go into the Vikings faster, but you don't sacrifice something like that. It would be very important. But this is just a gamble. I can't get behind it in terms of strategic one-upping and anticipating and whatever else. It's just a gamble as far as I can see. So I'm not for it if the gamble sucks, and I'm for it if the gamble works. I'm for it if you turn $100 into 200. I'm not for it if you lost our entire life savings, you know? Typical gambling stuff. The auto turrets come in and do a little bit of damage, but ultimately sacrifice of the Raven could hurt later on. Because now Byun is even, I feel like, more desperately gambling on this Banshee play. Maru was probably kind of even weirded out. Like, why use the Raven? It's a very dangerous play. Because it's, regardless of him having Vikings or not, which it could have been him trying to get his own Ravens, maybe Vikings weren't out, fair enough, but he had Cyclones with the upgrade. Which I guess would have been out in the map more likely than back at home, so... Actually, I could see that Raven dipping in and getting out if the Vikings weren't there. Okay, fair enough, I take it back. So Maru probably not confused, but the less that he sees of a Raven on the front lines, the more he'll probably now be wondering, alright, what is happening? What does this mean? Why is there no second Raven? Where are your Vikings? And, well, by the time he starts thinking that, the Banshee appears. So has the gamble worked out for Byun? He is going to be doing a lot of SCV damage, but can he hold back at home? His cloaked Banshee only has so much use defensively with 3 Cyclones and 3 Vikings, but no scan on the Banshee itself. It was used on the high ground here, means that the Banshee is helping out a tremendous amount. SCV pull to help out as well, and Maru is forced all the way back, all while losing SCVs. 9 of them went down before the Banshee was taken care of, and I guess it did actually get killed. So at least that is now no longer having to be worried about. But that was a non-success there for Maru. I'll say it was even a bit of a failure. Byun's Banshee play actually doing work for him. Just doesn't get said very often in TvT anymore. He's even going into a total of what is now 4 Banshees, which you just do not see very often. So 1 Banshee for each mineral line, or 2 together. Whatever. Gonna force out a couple of scans, because this game is one of the most, one of the least Raven-based TvTs we'll probably ever see. With the way that Maru followed up his 2 racks, with the way that Byun had gambled on the Banshees. So Maru, he is behind. He certainly is. 3rd CC is done, but not in location. Byun's is done on location. Byun has slightly slower upgrades. Oh, and he's very far behind on the stim and combat shields. Well, no, he's double tech labbing. Okay, so he's not too far behind on the combat shields, just behind on the stim. Which means he's a little behind on production of Marines, but he's got 2 extra barracks faster, so not actually. Okay, okay. Yeah, so, you know, ultimately, Byun is in the lead. Definitely economically, no doubt about that. And then in every other department, I'd still say so. Because the stim being a little bit later has not impacted this particular game. So Maru is going to have to do one of his trademark comebacks in TvT, but this is within that range of a comebackable TvT for sure. If he was down 50 supply, I'd say that Maru couldn't even do that, but 20, even 30, even 40? Yeah, he could do it. 50 is where I start to doubt. A couple of Vikings being sacrificed to get a handful of SED kills. Not really worth it, most people would say. 5 SEDs for 3 Vikings, that doesn't add up. And the amount of distraction was also quite limited, so I would say not worth it much at all. With those Vikings, he did have air control. Byun never went into additional non-medevac Viking unit, or starport units, so it seems like a freebie. Byun's push coming in with its upgrades finishing. A Banshee to once again be that pesky presence. 24 army supply lead. Change the Banshee with the tank, that'd be great. And oh, even better, it caused another scan. Oh, the Banshee lives! Wow, these Banshees. This is the least Raven TvT I've ever seen in the last like 5 years, and the most good Banshee TvT I've seen in the last 5 years. Banshee MVP. But Byun is, I guess, not going to actually find the opening that he was hoping for. Doesn't want to overstay his welcome. Waterfall's kind of weird in TvT, because even though you still have that old TvT kind of rule, which is that you don't really want to rally push in a TvT, you don't want to have Marines ant trails on the map, because mobility is such a huge factor in Marine tank. In this map, with how direct it is, you know, from here to here, right, where his push was, it's not only really direct and fast, it also means that you can retreat faster to your bases back at home to defend, if Maru had sent out 2 drops. Obviously still a gambit though. Still something that's very risky. So literally just put all of your armed forces on the front lines, and Byun, probably too much respect from Maru to just assume that he could stay there and be hunky-dory and not have to worry about anything. And he'd be kind of right about that. Maru did drop a substantial number of units over to the left side. Now they've moved over here. This is what he dropped, I believe. Looking for a kind of Terran run-by or drop, I guess. He could have picked him up again. But if this game isn't going to end on the Marine tank 3 base versus 3 base situation, then it is going to go into 4 bases and probably into 5, even though it's Waterfall. Just the way it goes. Maru, without collapsing on Marine tank like he did in the last game, is now successfully going to be able to go into the late game Viking war, right? So even though he's 40 supply down-ish, 30, I guess now, the tanks cover that. Properly placed tanks cover that, which is kind of the conundrum. 4th base actually going to go down here. Excellent use of the surplus of army here from Byun to try and tear Maru apart. But yeah, so the tanks are going to cover the army supply, which means that Maru can steadily build into the air if that is his choice. He could also be super committing on 8 barracks again already, trying to outproduce the other guy who has a better economy. But probably isn't going to work out too well. And this used to be the trap that Terrans would fall into, and this would be the very strong chokehold that would eventually lead to death for Terran players. But now, Terran players as a whole, as a race, have recognized, okay, I just need to kind of, you know, contain myself. I need to turtle a little bit. I need to make sure that I've properly anticipated any forms of multi-pronged pressure with good tank positioning and a little bit of side defense. And then I'm going to consistently build into Vikings. You know, 2 medevacs if they want. In this case, he actually did go up to 5, so fair enough. But then into a lot of Viking production. That way, if Byun either tries to engage on me without going into his own Vikings, well, I can start picking away at them. And I'll have that air control and I'll have that vision control. And if he does also go into Vikings, I'm not as screwed as if I would have been if I had just non-gone to Vikings at all, right? So if Maru has absolutely 0 air control and Byun comes in with 8 Vikings and a Liberator shows up, well, then Maru is basically conceding this game at that point. So that's the magic. That is the magic that is covering 30, 40 army supply of TvT, tanks basically doing it with sensor towers, and then you kind of cover the one-up that is air superiority by just consistently making air. So even though Byun's transition into those additional starports is faster and stronger, Maru is not going to just immediately fall out on the Viking war. He will soon, though, if he's not careful. So this would be where if his 4th base hadn't been killed and denied, and it's actually up and running with all the gases, he probably has already added on his additional starports. But without it, that caused a big bump in his plan, and he has to slow-go it to actually get his base up. So tank is going to be saved with a dive from the Marines and the Liberator, but it is a small army overall. Maru with the Sense Tower off to the left side knows not too much to fear immediately. So he does commit most of his forces off to the right, which overwhelms Byun's 2 tank, whatever many Marines. And Maru has successfully gotten his 4th base as a planetary up and running, moving on to a 5th already as well. Once again, Byun's going to try and drop into the main base, but unlike last game where he was able to just continue hammering the point home, right? Drop, drop, aggress, drop, drop, aggress. This time around, we have the missile turret ring that was missing from the last game that ended just shy of 17 minutes, I want to say. So that's not going to be the opening that Byun was hoping for. And now both of them are, well, close to maxed out anyways. Byun's taken a little bit longer as he has committed a lot of resources to additional command centers and to those starports and Vikings, which he is winning. 9 Vikings to 4, absolutely winning that portion of the army fight. But he is the one now on the defense. We had a faster +3 attack invested into for Maru. So he will have a temporary upgrade lead, but he has not started armor whatsoever. We'll see if that does impact the game. So much more so, probably going to be about the positioning in the Viking War, which now Maru, as I said, comfortable in 4 bases, is going to add on those 2 starports. He's probably also going to swap over into air upgrades after this +2 attack is done. Not done yet, though, and Byun tries to find an opening, but it was kind of deceiving. Yeah, Maru was unprepared to take the engagement, but there were still so many tanks that were guaranteed to siege that was something that Byun had to run away from. And Vikings try and get some extra damage done, but ultimately trade out, for I guess the most part, losing some of the Vikings' lives. And Byun is once again a little bit more on the defensive, although they kind of split the map in half as they both take their 5th and almost the exact same time. Basically a mirror right now. Oh, there's a Widow Mine in play? When is that built? That might have been built back in the Banshee thing. Well, that's funny. That's going to be annoying. Liberator's going to siege up and actually go for a tank, because I do think that is very well worth it. The Liberator dies now. It's already done a great trade. Which it will. +3 armor starts up for Maru finally. So it will be substantially far behind, but now we're so much more into tanks and Vikings, I'm not sure that's going to be the biggest difference. In fact, I really like the fact that this +2 vehicle weapon's done for Maru more than I like that +3 armor. Because that takes away a kill shot of the Marines of Byun once they stim, which is a lot more impactful. Not that it's actually done, so it didn't impact this particular battle, and Byun won the air war, so the Liberators are going to dominate if Maru doesn't get the heck out of there. So that also kind of fell flat there. It looked promising for a second, and then... Okay, just give it, never mind. Byun getting a little overeager, chasing that, just to pick up Vikings that are landed. I wonder if that's awkward for the medevac pilot, to pick up a Viking that's landed. Anyways. Maru still with 13 tanks. He's going to be able to buy a lot of time, but he is absolutely on the retreat. 4 Liberators are going to be hard to take care of, even if you had Vikings, even if you had Marines trying to dive on top of them. That's a lot to tear down before they tear down you. So Maru is on the ropes yet again. Byun actually going to be able to find this base by the looks of things, as Maru has to just agree. Yeah, I can't defend that. You got me. I'm going to pull away. And Byun is also added on a fusion core and going into Liberator range. This Liberator is going to be even more pesky. Once again, even if you have Vikings or Marines to try and dive on top of that, it's going to take that extra little bit of a trade as well. So I think it is a worthwhile upgrade as long as you have the economy to do so. In this game, I actually don't know if Byun investing into a fusion core and the Liberator range upgrade was really worth it. It's not exactly starved for cash, but with some of these most recent engagements not going super well for him, he soon will be. And the Liberators are not going to dominate the skies anymore, as Byun has lost the air control. So they might take some time to tear down, but they're eventually going to get torn down. Much better might have been, again, that +2 vehicle upgrade, or maybe more Vikings, which he's now getting back into. But the tug of war continues, and this time we see Maru once again on the offensive, looking to deny this base from his opponent, and kind of has to. It's going to end up being 1 base behind if he doesn't. Maru has taken the mirror base with an orbital as well, which is yet to be harassed, and oh, this base isn't even mining. Okay, yeah, so Byun does need this base. If Maru denies it, Byun's going to be kind of broke. That's a more important base than it might have to be at this point. Now, Waterfall's on a big map and doesn't have a lot of bases, so it very quickly would be an important base regardless, but especially with him not mining from the top left thanks to 1 Liberator. Byun doesn't have the actions to spare, or the Marines to spare, to actually go over there and deal with that, or a single Viking even. I really think this has to do more with the actions, but anyways, Liberators siege up very courageously, and it is going to be comboed with courageous Marines trying to pounce on the tanks, but once again, that's an area where, yeah, maybe the tanks weren't as defended as Maru would hope. There were enough of them capable of sieging up that Byun, it doesn't really get that running over effect. Like, okay, I got you, I'm gonna run over you, and now the ball's in my court. Now the pendulum swings back my way. Didn't really happen. We still have split map scenario for the most part. Both of them even supply. What are the resource trades like? Very, very similar. Byun technically a little bit worse off on the resources lost, which with his denied base mining is about to be really bad, because Maru is getting this base up and running. Can't believe 1 Liberator did all that work. Finally taken care of. Vikings went and dealt with it. And now they're going to go after an orbital, which actually might be a good use of the Vikings, but then they're not going to be back at home, so it's like, is that really a good use? And Byun decides, no, they have to be back at home, which I think he's right about that. He's losing tanks to Liberators. The Vikings severely out of position. Might cost him a couple of tanks. And a couple of tanks might cost him access to this base. But it would be oh so tempting to send something over here, an orbital. Really undefended. This tank doesn't count. Yeah, I'm just not able to do so. That is almost painful, actually. But at least all the Vikings have come together, so 13 Vikings to 3. No doubt about that. Byun's gonna be winning that war. And he does find 1 orbital. It's a freebie with a bunch of Marines. Not the one I was expecting, but nonetheless. Actually, Maru takes that opportunity to move forward with his own small Marine force, coupled with a handful of tanks. But Byun had taken so much army supply away from the ground, literally protecting the tanks with their bodies, that Maru identified it, pounced on it, and now has his own tanks covering any form of punish that Byun could have gotten. Byun now just trying to run away with the Marines, runs into a very oddly placed tank, but okay, cool. Take that one off anyways. But yeah, that was ultimately not a great trade there for Byun. I mean, he got the command center, he got a handful of SCVs, but maybe it was literally a trade. Let's go back to that resources lost. Oh my gosh, it was. Wow, they're even closer in the resource loss at this point. Wow, 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 wow. Okay, yeah, one base apiece not mining is the situation. And no one's gone for the kind of pocket bases, because how could you in a game like this? Now the army swings over to the left. The bio upgrades have evened out for a while at this point, by the way, guys, so we are just going to harp on the +2 vehicle weapons. Maru's tank's straight up better. Unless I've misunderstood in the last couple of years, these +2 tanks of Maru one-shot the Marines of Byun once they stim. The same is not said for Byun's tanks, which is a pretty big deal. I mean, these fights happen very quickly regardless of that one less kill shot, but it's, you know, it's still quicker is better in this case. And Byun might have just good old-fashioned forgot about it. I do not believe that he would intentionally forgo it. I think he just forgot about it. Tank numbers also slightly in favor of Maru is helping, and he was quicker to getting his bases back up and running, so he has been able to make a little bit of a better army, just a more complete one. He catches Byun out of position by just going quicker to the other side of the map. Byun's Vikings were able to respond as fast as Maru's army, but the rest of Byun's army could not. So all he takes away from the loss of that orbital and the SCVs are a couple of medevacs. Whoops. It doesn't really matter too much, does it? And now leaving 3 tanks behind would have worked against a small force of Maru. Doesn't work against the entire army, just loses 3 tanks really for no good reason. These tanks as well could be taken down. And that's something that Maru is going to go after. Byun is trying to respond as quick as possible, but a similar scenario to 10 minutes ago on this exact bridge thingy, whatever you want to call it, where there just are so many tanks from Maru. If they're going to get sieged, they're going to blast those Marines apart, even if they're trying to come in from different directions with the concave. And that was just awkward. That was also just awkward for Byun, who had so much of this river to work around, literally. That didn't work out. Didn't work out as a surround. Now going to try and take the positioning to at least get some revenge on his orbital. Gonna take down Maru's, or maybe not. The last-second mass SCV repair. Nope, not gonna be able to save it. Will end up losing it, and both of them are reduced to, yet again, 1 base mining apiece, basically. Although this is not mining yet. A Liberator is doing now the return job. Revenge. Revenge in every portion of the map here for Byun. Maru's gonna have to sack a couple of Marines, take care of that. 1 Viking. Okay, 1 Viking can go over and deal with that eventually. So this is better mining right now for Byun. He's getting the opportunity to finally invest more into the army, so he might have a 10, 15 army supply lead. But that's not just because of the mining. It's also because Maru is making a choice right now going into 2 Ravens. Both of them did add on the additional starports, but didn't have time, basically, to really fully do that transition. The Turtle 5 bases, okay, now we both have mass Viking Raven armies. It's been way too action-packed for that, so we've had mostly the Marine Tank Viking war, just about who dominates the skies and who can abuse a Liberator. And now, we have Maru making that choice, making maybe even a bit of a gamble here, too. It started with a gamble, might end with a gamble, going for the 2 Ravens. I call it a gamble, not because it's like, you know, literally do or die. Okay, maybe don't do that. But more so because it is a very, very costly investment that could accidentally run over Marines and die and do absolutely nothing. That's what Ravens seem to do best, even in the hands of some pros. But if you use them correctly, if you hold on to them, they build energy, they use energy, they build energy, they use energy. We know that spellcasters are fantastic to have in really close economic situations, which this certainly is. It's just that we usually are talking about like fungals and parasitic bomb and storms. Maybe EMPs, but not in this matchup. So, yeah, the Ravens could be huge, or they could absolutely suck. We will find out soon, as both players once again looking to take down some of their opponent's bases. The Ravens already turning to be out a very good investment. 1 interference matrix opened up the opportunity to move on to this base. The Marine number is not high enough, however, to actually jump on top of all of Byun's tanks. The SCV pool is going to help out, taking care of the rest of the army, and those Ravens were pretty fresh, so all they really had was the interference matrix. No auto turrets to support. Nonetheless, 21 SCVs were killed to try and take down that entire army, but it looks like the SCV numbers might also be lost for Maru as well. Nope, or maybe they're going to be saved, pulling back to the safety of a planetary, just lose the orbital. Byun not able to jump on top of that, and Trade is now going to be down about half the workers, is also about to lose all those tanks that were initially protecting each other earlier on, but now with the rest of Maru's army coming in, aren't doing the best job of it. One lone tank and a handful of Marines, all that stops Byun from losing not just his orbital, but also getting his planetary sieged upon, which, you know, it would take a little while to actually kill. We're only talking about 4 tanks, no longer the 13 versus 10 or whatever it was earlier on. Now it's 5 versus 10, which, by the way, Byun with 10 tanks still looking pretty nice on that position. But the point is, Maru is going to try and get what he can, but ultimately is going to have to abandon this position. What did he get for it? Again, SCVs, didn't actually get the command center. Is that going to be enough? He's taking a loss in the army supply, and he, again, significantly down in the tank supply. He's gonna have a hard time actually drawing the line in the sand to recover the deficit. It's usually how you would recover an army deficit in TvT. It's just like, well, thank God I have tanks. Not the case here. Byun might be down overall 30 supply, but he is ahead in the army. He's got that tank number. He's got the Vikings try and ward off the Ravens. Didn't really impact this fight, but enough units from Maru with the SCV pool is going to come in here and take care of all of the tanks, the medevacs as well. 2 tanks siege up way behind the actual engagement and will ward away Maru from continuing to go forward. But what does that ultimately mean? What is this game actually going into? Maru also down to 21 SCVs. 21 SCVs to 18, both of them on similar numbers of orbitals. Let's check that. 2 orbitals for Byun, 1 for Maru. This is his last orbital. So no one's really muling to make up for this deficit. Currently, it looks like Byun just has more SCVs currently mining, so he's gotten the uptick there. Maru is about to get some decent mineral income, and our Liberator stopping Nats. But speaking of stopping mineral income, another attack from Maru jumps on top of unsieged tanks, but unsieged tanks aren't actually that bad. I mean, they're not ideal, but, you know, the regular DPS was doing a decent job against that, and now that they are sieged, their other issue is in play, which is that if they get jumped upon, if they get dropped upon, excuse me, literally dropped upon, they can't do anything about it. And maybe Maru doesn't even have to do that. He is pulling the boys? Is this actually happening? He is pulling the boys, you guys. He is not going to go for that base. Maybe eventually he would, but he decides to go for it. He's got an additional couple of Ravens to help out as well. And even without the SCVs, the auto turrets would have already done the job. And Byun is forced to tap out. Byun so close multiple times in this game to actually pushing Maru over once more. Doesn't do it. Falls behind 1-2. And one of the craziest TvTs I think we've seen. That was down to the wire. Sub 50 supply for both players. And I love that it ended with an SCV pool. Cherry on top right there. GG. Maru now leads 2-1. In the top right of Inside and Outs, losing a very, very close game on Waterfall, it is going to be Byun. In the bottom left, it is Maru, who has really been pushed the most in TvT in the series that I've seen in a while. It's not that he hasn't lost games or series before. He's lost some, but just not a lot. It's just that usually what happens is that we get really excited at the idea that Maru is going to lose. We're like, oh my god, he's like really behind and he might lose this one. Wow, okay, what's gonna happen? And then that's one game out of the series. And then the other 2, 1, 3 games, whatever it is, are borderline terrible. Maru just got like the mental edge. So whether it's a long game or a short game doesn't really matter. The point is Maru just looks at that after that really close game as unbeatable. Some Maru versus Cure games come to mind where you're like, oh my gosh, Cure might actually be doing this. I mean, he's lead here and here and here and here, and then, oh, well, Maru still won. Okay, great. And then all the other games, despite going 30 minutes, are heavily Maru favored. Which, coincidentally, was a real tough best of to cast. That happened earlier this year in Katowice. I think Wardy and I wanted to cry internally. Anyways, but point is, that is different from this best of 5. Byun is pushing Maru to the edge in every single one of these games, even though the other 2 weren't as close as the last one. Not many TvTs are. So what's going to happen here on Inside and Out? This time around, no proxies, no really quick aggressive openers from Maru, right? He went factory expands, one medevac to one medevac build in the first game, then 2 racks Reaper unsuccessfully the second game, then proxied 2 racks Reaper in the third game, and that's didn't even get him an edge. It actually was kind of a bad opener. You know, it didn't really seem to matter. He transitioned so fluidly, it didn't matter, but it didn't seem like it did a whole lot. Byun had an excellent defense. And now, for game number 4, we don't have any 2 barracks. We might get back into a medevac versus medevac situation. Could certainly see that happening. But it is TvT between 2 Korean Terrans, so surprise, surprise, factory expands. Not to just go ahead and put that on the Korean Terran thing, because it really is just most Terrans going factory expands. Some people can be a little bit greedy, a little bit risky. Like a special. He likes to really push extremes in different directions. Super fast 1 racks command center in TvT, and then into a proxy 2 racks. And that kind of stuff. For these guys, factory expand it is. Great defense, great offense. Lots of different ways to follow it up as well. So flexible. For Maru, he goes 2 Reaper, 1 Hellion right into the Cyclone. For Byun, 3 Reaper, 2 Hellion. So delay on his factory units, but a lot more potential in the opening engagement. Inside and Out does have that natural ramp, however, which just naturally works against the aggressor. Maybe not enough, though, especially if the defending Terran isn't paying attention. That will kill a lot of people in chat, for sure. Definitely kills me. But Maru was paying attention, is still in trouble. He does have some last-second fantastic micro to get the last shots on a Hellion and a Reaper, which made the 4 units quickly turn down to, or was it 5? Yeah, 5 units quickly turn to 3, and the Cyclone pops out, turn it down to 1, and the brief, very mini heart attack you might feel as the units head up your ramp is immediately met with relief. You're like, oh, okay, no, it wasn't a heart attack, it was just indigestion. Okay, great. That can be the exciting thing about TvT. So, Byun didn't get much done from the opener as far as the snowball effect, but blitzing right into that natural did still cause a little bit of an upset. Killed some of Maru's units, killed a couple of the SCVs. Byun now ahead by 5, also catching the 2 Reapers. They try and go for a dive-by. So, again, an excellent start for Byun, because last game was also pretty good. It was. It was probably one of the better defenses you could ever expect from such an aggressively placed 2 racks Reaper. Just didn't end up mattering. So, we'll see if this time it does. Byun might be ahead 5 or 6 workers, but he is now going to be behind a 3rd CC. He's also going to be a little bit behind... Actually, no, he isn't. Never mind, never mind. I'd say usually a lot of time the, whatchamacallit? A factory, because it's later producing a tech lab unit for this guy, for the guy who went 3 Reaper, 2 Hellion. You'll have the tank be, like, literally half a production line ahead from Maru, but not this time. So they are even on tanks. They are not going to be even on Ravens, so there you have it. Oh, and a big change up here from Byun right in front of my eyes. Just took me a little while to recognize it. 2 starports. It's a big difference, big difference. But starting with the first difference, 2 Ravens to 1, Byun is going to have to be wary of the trigger moment when Maru decides, you know what, I have 4 auto turrets in total, I'm just going to punch it. Because that is really powerful. And while he can combat it with maybe 2 of his auto turrets, 4 is greater than 2, guys. This is amazing. But the problem for Maru is that he doesn't know his opponent is going to be quickly escalating the Viking count. So 2 is not that big of a deal. You're like, oh, okay, went into reactor starport, fine. I went for a 3rd Raven, so it's just a change up. Then we're gonna have 4, and then we're gonna have 6. We'll add another one onto it every single time. And you're not just giving yourself literally more units, right? Which is always nice. You're also giving the Viking player more opportunity to shoot down the Raven before the Raven gets to pull the trigger on an auto turret or an interference matrix. And up until you get your own Vikings, well, the Vikings can be just a big old bully. 1 Cyclone and a handful of Marines, the only thing stopping them from literally just chasing down those Ravens, which thankfully do exist for Maru. So he's going to save them and repair them. Going to have to lift his own starport though, so can't even try to tackle the Viking problem, and this is looking very, very, very dangerous for Maru. His lock-ons finally netting him a unit. Although the first lock-on was still impactful, I would say. That's a very, very weak Raven there from Byun. But Maru, I think at this point, seeing how many Vikings his opponent has figured out that it's double starport. I mean, he might have already been guessing it with just how aggressively placed someone with like a single tank and a single Raven was pushing at him. That's what it started with, right? But whether you guess it or not, it's still very difficult to actually punch your way out of it, because you're kind of in a, not a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation, but you're between a rock and a hard place. Either direction is going to be very difficult to move. And so you can either try and nip it in the bud, pull the SCVs as immediately as possible, and that might not work, or you can wait, try and build up your Marine count, and then pull the SCVs, and that also might not work, because they have more Vikings and more tanks and whatever. So, very difficult position for Maru to play this out of. You would have, hoped that there was something else happening on the other side of the map, which, okay, now there is, that would have stalled this out or made this more complicated. Which is, I think, exactly what Maru is doing, what he is doing. The massive Raven drive-by, actually doing a lot of damage, getting some Ravens, some Vikings, almost getting a tank, getting a lot of SCVs, a lot of lost mining time, and then they're all living to either return to do it again, or to actually come back home and help out, perhaps potentially even with a backstab. But this Marine count is dwindling once again. I actually couldn't tell if that was on purpose or not. He might have been trying to focus fire this one weakened tank, I'm not sure. Liberator is encroaching, Vikings are landing, SCVs have to be pulled from Maru defensively, as he does just entirely evacuate the low ground. But his triple Raven, once again, heads into Byun's base, and these SCVs are back to mining. They never did. Triple auto turrets going to decimate the SCV population of Byun, to the point where even though Maru had to give up an entire natural, he's still ahead in workers. But his number of tanks is dwindling. He's down to 2, maybe even close to down to 0 as the Vikings land, tear those tanks apart. And we have ourselves another very, very close TvT. Maru has built up 30 Marines with stim and combat shields, however, and they're going to go for the concave. The Vikings are landing on the high ground. It means that totally supported by the tanks in the depth behind them. And we're at the tail end, and they are able to, well, at least some of them survive. But that was a lot. That was a lot to pull in there. Maru now down to 5 SCVs, just depending on the mules from his 3 orbitals eventually. This third one not actually landed. Maru took the opportunity when he could get it. If Byun had been all units on the low ground and Maru was pulling into this choke, forget about it. There's no way that Maru would have won the engagement. Because Byun was starting to build or push onto that high ground, it's like, it's kind of traded out. Maru comes out of that with a slight army supply lead, and he has picked up all of his medevacs and his Marines to go across the map and once again go after Byun's reinforcements, now after his production as well, something the auto turrets couldn't do as good of a job of, and these Marines will have no problem tackling a single tank, tackling the SCVs. That is going to be close to 0 SCVs for both players. In one hot second, there you have it for the 3, as Byun manages to escape with a couple, and Maru's maybe escaping with some? Actually, his medevacs aren't here, so I don't know if they're going to escape, but maybe it won't matter. 2 Vikings, not going to be controlled by the looks of things. Yep. Just barely controlled. Marines, like I said, better at dealing with that production of the auto turrets, which would eventually run out of time, so Byun forced to lift, try and save what he can, but if he does save them, what is he going to build from them? A handful of Marines? Is that enough gas? Neither one of them building any type of bank, really, up until this base trade. So even if you save the production, what's it going to go into? Maru just leaving his units, by the looks of things, maybe trying to take something down before they die, but I think his Ravens have moved on. They're no longer ambitiously waiting with these Marines. They're like, sorry, buddies, we're going to go elsewhere. And that is certainly the better thing to do. Let the Marines die and then give up the base. I mean, you're in full-on base trade mode. There's no reason to try and hold on to whatever is here. It just wouldn't work. So save what you can, which in this case is just going to be the buildings. Either way, at some point Maru finished 1-1. I'm not even sure when that happened, but that has helped. You know, a lot of tackling the double starport play can be anyways. There's other ways to tackle it, I suppose, but it can be just waiting for upgraded Marines. So you have a surplus of units that hopefully get some type of concave or surround, and then they can take down the pure tank Viking of the 2 starport player. And we saw that in action here, just in a very, very base tradey way. So what happens once the base trade has kind of been, like, accomplished? Well, I think without the Ravens, you're still talking about a mobility issue. Or Byun doesn't have mobility, and Maru does. You're still talking about a siege unit issue, which is that, you know, the tanks are most effective when they're sieged. Even though their DPS is okay. Oh, okay, I'm actually getting GG. Okay, I was gonna say the DPS is okay, even unsieged. They just, it's gonna be difficult to contest the amount that Maru can run around the map, pick off a unit, run away, pick off a unit, run away. And that's ultimately how Byun saw this game going. Because I think he was probably ready to tap out even prior to the Vikings dying right there. So the air units flying over Marines, classic problem with the type of composition that Byun had. It didn't happen, but I think even before that, the Vikings wouldn't have made or broken a potential win. It was the mobility factor. It was probably not knowing where the extra command center went to. And it was the 3 Ravens still being available, never shot down in this game, always managing to fly in prior to enough Vikings being there to stop them, and fly out before the Vikings can get the last shot. A triple Raven run by being the real reason Maru wins this game, and cements his 3-1 victory as well, which I just thought had gone for a little while longer. But Byun ultimately couldn't really get his command center across the map either. If his command center was over here and he flew it over here, he might have still been in this game too. But yeah, I think he also realized that command center is probably a goner. GG's. GG's. Another fun one for the last match. Maru takes a 3-1 and moves on to the finals.